Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kate Stambaugh. I work at the Applied Physics Laboratory in Maryland as an aerospace systems engineer and a young professional who's been at this conference for the past 3 years. And the first year I was here, I really found it hard to find other young professionals, and I'm happy to say it's been improving each year. There are more and more young professionals, and it's easier to find them, and we started doing some more programming, such as this panel, and last year we had a session with Reese, who's in the audience, and we had a networking reception on Monday night, and so we're trying to just get young professionals more engaged. The first, Space 2010 was my first year, and there was a lot of talk, like we've been hearing at this conference too, about the value of young professionals and the importance and the role that we're going to play in our industry. And then I looked around and didn't see that many, and it seemed like it was all talk and no walk. And so this session is for you guys. We have a panel of people from a variety of backgrounds, but we're not going to go through a presentation by each person. It's going to be just questions and answers, and I have a bunch of questions prepared, but I want it to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to ask questions whenever you want. I'll give you opportunities before we kind of move on to a different subject, and let's just make it a conversation, and hopefully everybody gets something out of it, and we'll go ahead and get started. Really feel free to interrupt at any time, though, because it's all about you, and we want you to get something out of it. So I'm going to let each of the speakers introduce themselves and a little bit about where they come from. And we'll start, why don't we start with Sarah on the end?
Okay. Hi, I'm Sarah Schall. I work at NASA Johnson Space Center. Did my undergrad at University of Michigan. Came to work at JSC immediately after that, worked in the Mission Control Center as a space shuttle flight controller. Went back to school to do my master's at MIT after about 4 years of working. Did a 2-year master's, thesis master's there. Then went back to JSC. Worked as an ISS flight controller for a few years, and then about a year ago transitioned over to the engineering directorate, and I'm doing project management for some technology development, small projects in the world.
I guess my turn. My name is Greg Scott. I did my undergraduate work at Penn State University. Got my dream job out of college, which was working in the space shuttle program. Specifically designing the launch trajectory for the space shuttle and then eventually working in mission control real time. But a couple of years later, I had some new opportunities. I got my master's degree at the University of Houston, which led to meeting some academics from overseas, and was invited to do my PhD at the University of Surrey, just outside of London in England. After a few years over there, I made my way back to this side of the pond, and I now work at the Naval Research Lab as a space robotics researcher.
My name is Timothy Heinerman. I got my undergraduate degree at Colorado State University. I actually immediately started my master's degree there. And as we all know with aerospace, we had funding, it went away, we had funding, it went away. So I quit my master's degree and went to be an IT consultant, and after 6 months decided this is really boring. And so started applying and got a job with Pratt & Whitney Rocketdyne here in Southern California. And I've been a combustion analyst for them for the last 5.5 years. I actually finished my master's degree a year or so later, but I think that's about it.
I'm Deborah Factor-Lepore, and I am currently an industry professor at Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I also have my own consulting company, DFL Space, my initials. I got my undergrad and master's in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan. Go Blue. And interestingly, my whole goal when I decided to go into aerospace was to get my undergrad in aero, an MBA, and be head of NASA. That was my plan. And I went according to plan for a short time, but 3 weeks into the MBA program at Michigan, I said, I really want to stay in aerospace. And so I switched out of the MBA program back into the engineering program and finished my master's in aerospace there. I went to the International Space University and did space policy and law right after that. Then went to Washington, D.C., worked for a think tank called Answer for about 9 years, and in the mid-90s helped open an office in Moscow, Russia, to look at cooperation of the former Soviet Union with the West, and did a lot of the early work, some pro bono work for the National Space Council at the time, which helped bring Russia into the space station program. Was an expert in propulsion and in Russian engines in particular, which led to my moving from Washington, D.C. to Washington State 15 years ago to work at a startup at Kistler Aerospace for a reusable launch vehicle, privately funded, and kind of proud to see the commercial work in the industry with docking of a commercial private entity with the space station program, because I actually led the unsolicited proposal that Kistler did to NASA in April of 1999 to do commercial cargo and crew resupply to NASA. So a lot of things that when you have sometimes the first idea in an entrepreneurial world, it's not always the one that ends up succeeding. We went through bankruptcy, came out of bankruptcy, and when we closed the company, I became president of Air Launch. That was funded by DoD, DARPA, and the Air Force for a small rocket out of the back end of a C-17. So I did that. And when that program ended, I opened my own company and then started working in academia. And I also do research as well with the Air Force. And I am getting my PhD now at Stevens.
All right, thank you for those introductions. To start us off, I want each of you to tell the audience what motivated you to enter the aerospace industry in the first place and how you landed your first job. So why don't we start with Sarah again on the end.
Okay. Let's see. So actually when I went to Michigan to study engineering, I was going to do biomedical engineering because I come from a family of doctors, nurses, I don't know, seemed interesting. I got to Michigan at the time, and then they said, oh, biomedical is only a grad program. So pick a different engineering for your undergrad. So then I went, well, I want to be an astronaut always, so I'll do aerospace. So that's actually what got me into the aerospace field, and then I never looked back. When I was doing my undergrad, I decided, well, if I'm going to do aerospace, then I want to work for NASA. So interviewed and actually interned not with NASA, didn't co-op with NASA, interned with Lockheed Martin, enjoyed it thoroughly, would have went there full time, except I did interview with NASA and got an offer, so that's what brought me down to Houston and just kept me there.
For me, it was 2 words: Star Wars. I guess growing up as a kid, that was, I was really into the sci-fi. Loved the movies, obviously the Star Wars and as well the Star Trek, which I know you're not really allowed to like both, but I did. And that's really, I guess, what first got me motivated. But I also had a couple of cousins who had studied aerospace engineering, one at Michigan actually, and was really kind of put them on a pedestal and was really excited about the stuff that they were talking about and the stories that they told. So that started pushing me in that direction, and I guess I haven't stopped since.
I wanted nothing to do with aerospace. I grew up on a farm in eastern Colorado and then later moved to a small city of like 30,000 people in southern Colorado. And so the space industry just wasn't really there. I mean, the movies and stuff like that. So I went to be a mechanical engineer, mainly focusing on internal combustion engines. That's what I understood. I liked racing and stuff like that. About 3 years in from my mechanical engineering degree, a professor just tapped me on the shoulder and went, "Hey, I've got this research money coming in to do some rockets. Are you interested?" And professor taps you on the shoulder and you go, "Of course I'm interested." And then again, did that for about 2 years until the money came and went, and then left and got my master's degree also in mechanical engineering. Pratt & Whitney Rocketdyne actually is the one who paid for a portion of my master's degree, so that was kind of my connection to them. And then when I left my master's, it was kind of in one of the happened to be lows of the company, and so they couldn't hire, and I interviewed at a couple different places and nothing really fit, so that's when I went to the IT consulting firms. And then when I got bored, I called my connections and they're like, "Actually, we can hire you now," and been there ever since.
So you heard already a little bit of my motivation. I always liked math and science growing up, and also came from a family that part was on the medical side. My dad is a doctor, and my brother now as well. But my dad and his siblings were the first ones to go to college, and he came from a family of entrepreneurs and who did various things to make a living when they came to this country. So I think my entrepreneurial side probably came from that. And the other half of my family was all educators. And so I think that influenced quite a bit. But I didn't want to be a doctor because I didn't like blood. And I didn't want to be a dentist because I didn't like bad breath. So then I said, well, I guess I'll be an engineer, but I didn't really know what was an engineer. And when I was a junior in high school, there was a career fair for junior high school girls in downtown Detroit. So I went to this event by the Society of Women Engineers, and this lady got up and she said how the best day of her life was when the car engine she designed, drove down the street. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is so boring. So I don't like cars, and I lived on a Ford Street. It's Detroit, suburban Detroit, so you lived on a Ford Street or a Chrysler Street or a GM Street. And I thought, oh, this engineer thing is not going to work out. But there was the space shuttle had just flown, and I saw a little flyer in the back of the room, and somebody was doing aerospace components, one of the automobile manufacturers or suppliers. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. And literally, that's when I had my aha moment that I shared with you, and started on that path. And it's kind of interesting looking at, especially for young girls, and the demographics of, first of all, any young people losing interest, or how do we get them interested, keep them interested in math and science at young ages. And we usually lose people around middle school. So, if you look at the demographics today, deciding to be an engineer as a woman at junior year of high school is kind of late. So it's interesting. I've compared with a lot of my colleagues about when did we have our aha moments for going into engineering and or in aerospace, and they're all different. And some motivated by some of the very same things here, and sometimes just wanting to do something different. And I always wanted to do something different. And I think the auto industry clearly influenced me because I did do propulsion, I did do engines, just ones that went higher and farther and faster and more power.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about networking, since we're all here at a conference and there's obviously a lot of networking opportunities, but it's not always as easy as it looks, especially as a young professional at this conference where there are people from all over the industry at all stages of their careers. So we'll start with Tim, and just what do you think is the value of networking, and what's a specific example of a networking relationship that has opened up an opportunity for you?
Well, I mean, at the beginning part of our careers, obviously we're not experts in anything. Of course, we think we were because we learned all this stuff in school, and then we get out and figure out we really know nothing. But one thing we are really good at is making friends. And so one thing that I've always tried to do is get to know as many people as possible, because if nothing else, if I don't know the answer, I know I don't know the answer, I at least know who to send them to. And so first couple of years, both in college and then once I got into the real world, working at Pratt & Whitney Rocket, I made it a point to try to meet as many people as I did. And of course, I started with younger people, just going out to lunch and stuff like that, and then slowly worked my way up to the guts of talking to vice presidents of engineering and stuff like that. But over the first 6 or 8 months, it was amazing, and a lot of it was sheer luck, but it was, oh, we have this problem, and we have no clue who to talk to. I'm like, actually, I know somebody. And so it was the kid who was here for 6 months that knew something that none of the others knew who to talk to. And so it's just trying to build that network of what people work on, what their expertise is, what they like doing, and then you can just be that phone book of referencing everybody around. And so you quickly get known as the person who knows everybody. And as that, then more people come and introduce themselves to you, so it kind of builds on itself.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to echo that. I mean, I really couldn't have said it any better. At the end of the day, the most important thing to do at any level of your career, whether you're just starting out or whether you've been in for, going on 30 years, it's important to make sure you build and maintain that network. And if you become the guy that knows the guy that knows the guy, then that's incredibly valuable to any organization. And I would say, from at any type of activity as well, not just within your company, and it's certainly important, but even at events like this, to just go out and don't be afraid to meet and talk to people. And as I guess a specific example related to this conference, I got my job specifically because of this conference. back at the 2009 event. I'd been coming for a couple of years and presenting papers as part of my PhD research, but at the end of the day, you're presenting a paper and you kind of show up at your session and maybe you talk to people, maybe you don't, and then you go your separate way, and then there's 1,400 other people at this conference that you just kind of blend into the ocean. But I really tried to make it a point at the 2009 conference, because I knew I needed a paycheck pretty soon, that I wanted to really just go out there and do everything I could. So not only did I start more directly interacting with everybody in the sessions that I was a part of, but I also learned a lot about the other activities that AIAA does. And my specific example was getting involved with one of the technical committees. And specifically now the Space Automation and Robotics Technical Committee, which as of last night I got elected to be the chair of. It's a really good way to get to know the people that are in that specific or very specific area of aerospace engineering or the space program. And it was through that meeting in 2009 where a guy was talking about this new contract that they had, and they were building this new facility, and it couldn't have been more appropriate to my research and my interests. And several nagging emails later, I got myself an interview, and it's worked out ever since.
Yeah, and I'd also say you can take the opportunity to network via AIAA or other societies at local events too. So people always think of these big conferences as good networking opportunities, which they are, but not a lot of young professionals get to go to these big conferences, or not a lot of members at large even. But so I've really leveraged networking at my local section. So in Houston is a big AIAA section, and it's it's NASA plus handfuls and handfuls of various contractors. But I've met a lot of people that I would not have otherwise met in my day-to-day job at NASA. And it has helped because, then you are the girl who knows, or the guy who knows the girl or the guy. And people are like, how do you know that person? I'm like, talk to people at AIAA section events. So.
And the other nice thing about the local section events, too, is the grass is always greener on the other side, and when you start talking to people who also work in your same area and in your same industry at those local events, you quickly figure out the grass is kind of brown everywhere.
Or green everywhere.
Or green everywhere, depending on how good of an optimist or a pessimist you are. But also then, too, as we all know with aerospace, too, none of our jobs are guaranteed forever, and if you have that very solid local network, literally, if I got a pink slip tomorrow for whatever dumb reason, I have a list of 20 people that live within 5 miles or so of my area that I would have my resume to within 5 minutes, and it would be in an HR director's hand shortly thereafter. And so having that network also gives you that ability as well.
How many of you belong to your college alumni association? So you think about times in your life where you have something in common with a certain community. So an alumni association is one example of networking. If you're networking with University of Michigan alumni, they watch football in Hoboken. It's a way of connecting and networking with people that have common interests in your community. So you can think about your memberships in AIAA or in Women in Aerospace or American Astronautical Society or whatever it is that interests you, and finding those areas, those networks where you have common interests with people, and those start to create other networks that you can reach out to. And thinking about AIAA in particular as a technical association, one of the first pieces of advice I got from a mentor at Answer, a former astronaut and who was president of the company, was to be an expert where there is none. And I've used that a lot in my career, and use conferences and technical conferences as a way to learn from other experts, and also shape what path you may take in your own career and where you want to be an expert as well. And then when you find other experts to be around, then you're also developing that community further. I think there's a very specific purpose that can come out of networking for your own career interests, for personal development, for professional development, and we'll get into the mentoring aspect as well. I want to give you all one very tangible tip that you can leave here with in terms of networking. So who has a business card on them? Everybody? Okay. So I'm going to show you what you do when you go to a conference and you meet somebody. So let's see if I have an example here. Okay, here's an example. card that I got from Doug Cook, retired from NASA, a longtime friend of mine, and we connected today, and he said, oh, do you know Lisa Guerra? She's at University of Texas. I'm like, very familiar. I think I talked to her with something on women in aerospace, but now that I'm in academia, this would be really good to connect. So what do? I write on the back of the card what we just talked about, what that action was, and now the part I forgot is then I put at the bottom AIAA space 2012. So now I have a context where I met this person, just put the location, you know, AIAA space 2012, what we talked about, if there's some action, could even be something like, oh, this was a friend of Sarah's, this was a friend of Tim's, or really tall, dark hair, you know, has 3 kids. Something that might help you remember that conversation. And then afterward, follow up. Send an email. I really enjoyed meeting you. And follow up on whatever it was that you said. So I'm going to send Doug an email that says, hey, can you connect me with Lisa on this subject? Because that'll remind him as well. And now we've just made another networking connection. So that's your little networking tip. Networking 101 of how to remember, because you meet a lot of people at these conferences and you're not going to remember who they were. Like, I don't know, sort of familiar. So this gives you a context, and also that follow-up is very important for creating the relationship later.
And I think that also goes for the business card you get from the person who's got the perfect job opportunity and you're never going to forget it. By the end of the week, you're going to forget it.
So I'm going to,
Go ahead.
I'm going to ask Greg a question, because he has a knack for remembering people better than anyone else I know. So what are your tips when you meet people and you say, I think I met you 4 years ago at this other conference in Georgia, and I don't know how you do it. So what are your tricks?
Well, I don't know how I do it either. I guess to some extent I do exactly what Deborah has mentioned. You get a business card and you write down some information. And the second step is you get back in touch with that person through an email or through whatever. But I tend to remember, I'm really, really bad at names, but I'm really good at faces and topics and ideas and discussions. So, for example, when I would meet somebody here at this conference, the business card is actually the most important thing. Because that I can remember the stories, and I can often remember the stories that I write on the back of the cards. And I tend to skim through the back of business cards when I'm trying to remember who I talked to, because it's the story itself that's going to remind me of who that individual was. Not the front of their business card, not that they worked for XYZ company and that this is their position and this is the city they're from. Like, those bits and pieces of information are I guess to some extent secondary, because for me the most important thing is to remember the story. And as some people, especially Kate, know, I like to tell stories. So for me, I relate everything to a story. And being able to tell those stories or remember those stories or relate the stories you hear to something in your own world will help you make those connections stronger. And kind of following on to what Tim said in that exact same respect, I may meet somebody at this conference who I will remember, and it's actually already happened at this conference once, where I remember the person, I remember the situation, I remember who else I was with, and I can drop a quick email to the person I was with to say, hey, who was this other person that was at this event with us at this time? And that right there, once I learn that, is my intro to then go up to that person again and say, hey, remember when we met 2.5 years ago at the space shuttle launch, and what blah, 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 blah. It helps to be able to make that context, keep that in context.
And, you know, to do that, it also means you must have your business cards with you all the time. All the time. So even you're going to a sporting event, you just never know when you might need a business card. So at a conference, and now this will be somewhat geared more toward the women, I have an outfit with no pockets. So, you know, I can't carry anything. Your badge is a great place to put business cards. If you're at a formal event, nice. you put a couple of business cards in here.
Mine are all
look
in my
at
badge.
this. So think about, because so many times if you offer your card and maybe somebody, it's an awkward moment, you're not sure, maybe you don't remember their name, A good way to do that is, oh, let me give you your card again, or can I have one of your cards? Don't be afraid to ask for that, because people may not offer it, they may forget, they may be rude, they may be embarrassed that they don't remember your name. It's also another good way. And if you see somebody that you recognize and you don't remember your name, you can just say, oh, hi, good to see you again, I'm Deborah. And usually they'll respond, or you might just say, oh, I'm having a horrible memory. What's your name again? And even today I did forget. I introduced a very good friend of mine as somebody else. A little embarrassing, but she forgave me.
And there, I don't work for or get commission from, but you can get Vistaprint, $10, 250 cards, free shipping. Cheapest thing ever, so if you change jobs next year, who cares?
Well, and then I've been very lucky of being able to convince my manager to keep sending me to conferences. And one of the things I always do is I walk into his office a few days after that conference with my deck of business cards, and it's, here's this person I met, and again, notes on the back. Here's what they do. Here's how it's important to us. Here's this person. Here's this person. And normally there's a stack I don't show him, and normally it's, and here's all the other people that don't matter right now, but someday they will. And that's a very quick way to give your manager the reason to always send you back, because you come back with tangible information.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions from the audience about networking? Yep.
Sure. So after you've taken a step of making the contact, initial contact after the exchange business cards at the conference, how do you sustain that relationship?
Okay, the question was, after you've taken the step to make that first contact after a conference, how do you sustain the relationship and build on it?
Effort.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Period. You have to be proactive. You have to be willing to do that. You have to take the assumption that the person that you're networking with will not make the effort. And if you feel that they're going to be important for you and your personal, professional, academic, etc. Future, you have to be the one that steps up and says, hey, this is me again. Hey, this is me again. And maybe not so much in a nagging way, but just as the little bird on the shoulder to remind that person, I'm still here, and we talked about such and so, and I'd like to continue this professional networking relationship through a proposal, through a meeting, through a phone call, whatever that may be. And maybe not every day or every week or even every month, but to be able to talk to somebody that you haven't seen in a year and drop them an email to say, referring to the back of your business card, when we spoke last year on such and so topic, you said that you could put me in touch with someone when I was getting to the end of my academic program. I'm at the end of my academic program. Now you've remade that connection a year later, and don't be afraid to do that.
You can also use events like this that happen annually. So quite often I reach out to colleagues and contacts over the years, and I will literally say, hey, are you going to AIAA Space 2012 next week? And maybe I haven't talked to them in months, but it's just a little reminder. It puts your name in their head, and then when you see them, oh yeah, hi, how are you doing? So even something as simple as that, but the follow-up is really important. And I also think you don't want to try to force it too much or work too hard, because things will happen naturally. If you have a natural interest in something and you put the effort into it and you think about that other person, this is a relationship building. And our industry uses what is in the business world would be called relationship-based marketing. Everything is about relationships. It's who you know. It's who the people you know, who they know, and link together. It's a community that's very small, and you start coming to this conference in particular, you will see the same people every year, and then you will start to know them. They'll become familiar, and you'll find that you interact in different ways. Maybe you work together in this company or this project, you don't see them for 5 years, and something else comes together. So a lot of that is, again, like the Alumni Association example. When common people are together with common interests, or you get involved in a technical committee, those are going to be the relationships that are the most powerful, that you have passion in, and that those around you have the same passion.
I'll add one thing. Part of how this panel formed, Deborah is a very good example. I saw her speak on another panel the past 2 years at this conference, and when I was looking for panelists, and I'd met her at a Women in Aerospace event, and maybe emailed her that one-time follow-up, but I wasn't on Deborah's radar at all. I knew who she was, but I don't think she knew who I was. And it had been over a year since I talked to her, but I thought, you know what, I'll just ping Deborah and see if she's interested. And I sent her this email saying, I really enjoyed your panels in the past, and I think you'd be great for this panel. And she wrote back immediately saying, wow, thanks. I had, didn't know you'd been watching and listening, and I'd love to help. And so, I mean, right here is a good example of how that there was a one-time follow-up. A lot of time went. We didn't really know each other, but it was enough of a connection that it got us right here, right now.
Yeah, very good example. Thank you, Kate.
One other quick thing too, do your homework before a conference. I mean, the program's always out, so it's pretty quick to flip through and go, okay, these are the things I'm interested in. These are the people who I've never met, but I'm interested in what they do. And make that list and make sure you're in the right place at the right time where you're going to meet those people. And that, I mean, especially if you come in with a loaded question on a topic, you're guaranteed to have something to talk about for a little bit, and they're going to remember who you are.
Yeah. Are there any other questions from the audience about networking? Okay, so we'll move on to mentoring. I know Deborah is very passionate about mentoring, so we'll start with you on what is a mentor and why is it so important?
So yes, thanks, Kate. I'm a huge advocate of mentoring, and research shows actually that mentoring makes a difference no matter who you are, no matter who does the mentoring. Mixed gender, same gender, similar ages, different ages, mentoring up in age, mentoring down in age, ethnicity. The difference is having access to a mentor and creating that relationship, which is sort of a corollary off of the networking part in some ways. How many of you have a mentor? Excellent. How many of you are a mentor to others? Very good. So mentoring has several forms. It can be in the form of a coach or an advisor, somebody that you look up to for advice on how to network, career navigation, should I go back to school or not? Maybe it's a sticky issue with a customer. But it also can be somebody who is sharing their networks with you, and that you're building a relationship together with an objective, and somebody kind of takes you under their wing. It also, as you progress in your career in more senior levels, can take on the form of advocacy or promotion, where a mentor is somebody who can help you get access to the customer or have FaceTime in front of the VP or the CEO or in front of the customer again. And quite often, particularly in corporate America, this is quite often how people get promoted, is because of their relationships with mentors. So there's formal mentoring, there's informal mentoring. Some organizations have a formal mentoring program where you're paired with somebody very specific in your organization, and others have informal mentoring where there's really not a structure necessarily to it, but it's more of a casual, serendipitous relationship. I actually like both kinds, and they have different benefits at different times. And I've done a lot of mentoring programs, and I'll give you a little bit of homework, because you have to do that as being a professor. On the Women in Aerospace website, which is womeninaerospace.org, you can, on the left side, go down to services, I think, and professional development, and there's a tab in there for mentoring. And WIA has quite a number of resources on the website on how to be a mentor, how to be a mentee, and you can also download the paper I wrote quite a long time ago with the Society of Women Engineers about mentoring strategies. I did it on women mentoring women because I'd never had a female mentor in my career. I never even had a female professor, actually. So, that was few and far between. I felt that was really important. But if you just take out the gender part, the issues are the same. It doesn't matter, like I said, who mentors who, and I encourage you to reach out. I do believe that if you have an informal relationship, or even if you reach out to somebody and say, hey, would you be my mentor? I always give them homework and have them read my paper first and do the homework about what they're looking for, because I may not be the right one. I may want to refer them to somebody else. And I do put a little structure in it, because people are afraid sometimes that if you ask somebody to be their mentor, that it's like asking you to marry them, and you're going to have this relationship forever. So I tend to, if I set up a formal relationship, give some structure, 1 year or 6 months or something, or we're going to touch base once a month. but some kind of structure to it so it's not so scary. And I think you'll find that reaching out to people and asking them to help you or to be a mentor, or if you're reaching out to others, is about that relationship as well, and just having respect on both sides and setting the expectations. And by the way, one other thing, no, I'm gonna save it. I'll save it for my tip.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any experiences either with a formal or informal mentor or mentoring program? Don't have to, it's okay.
Well, one thing, multiple mentors is a fantastic thing. I personally think you need at least 5. One that is directly day-to-day life, somebody who is senior to you in your company, somebody who does exactly basically what you're doing, somebody who kind of knows roughly what you do but really doesn't know the intimate details, but it's somebody you can kind of go bounce off political questions to. Somebody who doesn't do anything near what you do but is in the company because they're normally are networked in another area. And then a couple of outside ones, whether it's a local company and similar technology or not. And then I always tell everybody, try to get somebody who is in a completely different industry, because they have a very different perspective on everything. And whether it's, how do I go argue this with my boss, or how do I go discuss with this guy who's been here for 40 years that he doesn't know what he's talking about because he missed this point. I mean, just getting those kind of inputs, it's helpful to have a very broad spectrum of people to talk to.
I would also advise, preferably, not to have a formal mentoring relationship with somebody who is your boss, who writes your performance review, for example. Tends to be, you could be in a conflict of interest position, because quite often when you meet with a mentor, you may be looking for advice on things to where you have some uncertainties or some questions or some vulnerabilities, and those tend to be areas that people are not as comfortable sharing with somebody who is in their direct chain of command. So I tend to advise against that, but sometimes you can have the best boss ever and you can work that out. But just kind of be in the context. Tim gave a great listing of having multiple mentors, almost having a board of mentors. And you can have different mentors at different times of your career because you have different interests and different issues that come up. So again, you don't have one mentor for life. If you do, you're very fortunate in that relationship. And I will say the first female mentor I ever had was completely outside. It was a formal relationship, and I specifically picked somebody or asked to be matched with somebody that was not in aerospace, because I knew aerospace. So I really, at that time, was looking for something very different, and it was a fantastic experience.
Are there any questions in the audience about mentoring? All right, so we'll move on to making career moves. Since AIAA defines young professional as 35 and under, I mean, we have probably in the audience right now everything from students up to older than young professionals. And so we're all coming from different spots, but we all have either made career moves or will at some point make some type of career move. So we'll start with Sarah, who made a change about a year ago, as she said in her introduction. So can you tell us what prompted you to start looking for something new, and how do you know when it's time to make a change?
Sure, I can talk from my own experience. Probably not unilaterally applies, but so from my experience, I had worked in mission operations for my whole career. Again, I took a break. It wasn't really a break, but I went to grad school in the middle for 2 years. So I had 4 years, 2 years of grad school, and then 4 more years of mission ops. And so I was looking around mission ops and looking at career paths and what's kind of the next logical step there. And I looked upward and saw you could aspire to become a flight director, which is very hard to do. It's doable. You've got the right skill set, you work hard, but it is long hours, it's nights, weekend shifts, it's years of that. And I have a small son, so I didn't want to commit to that. So I thought, okay, that's not the career path I want. And then the only other really upward career path in mission ops director was to become a team lead, and you could become a branch chief. I mean, you could move up the leadership, but and that's what most people end up doing. Or you could just stay a lifelong flight controller, which is also fun, but I was looking for a change. But I didn't want to do just the team lead, group lead, branch chief. although it's more responsibility, it's more pay, it seemed like just personnel management to me, and I wasn't so enthused by that. So then I thought, okay, well, I need to move and do something else within NASA, and that's kind of what drove me to start looking around outside of mission ops, and a lot of people said, well, it's crazy, your whole career so far has been in it, won't you be starting over? And I said, I'll take a chance. And I did not. I did take a lateral move, so it was not a promotion in money or government service level, but it was, to me, I was following a passion and not, I think people do get in the trap of promotion versus passion, and they feel like they should or have to keep up with their peers, take the promotion versus following their passion. And hopefully, eventually, the position I'm in now, where I'm doing project management, I do actually have more responsibility. I have more people under me, stuff like that. So in that regard, it is kind of an upward move. But on paper, I don't get a dime more, and I'm not a higher pay level. But there is much more potential for upward growth, and I have really enjoyed it. It's a whole new field. I've moved from operations doing payloads and visiting vehicles to life support. I don't know anyone in the life support community. I knew very little about it. So it was a steep learning curve, but I've really enjoyed it. It's a good move.
So on the other side of things, Tim has been in the same role and position that he was originally hired into, but you've obviously managed to not have a stagnant career. So how do you, without changing, still continue to grow and develop, without changing, official roles?
Well, one, I got lucky because I was an analyst, and at least in our company, the analysts kind of get to do the cradle to grave thing. I mean, we're there at the beginning, we're thinking about a concept, and then we're part of the actual design part of it, and then we get to go break it and test it, and then we get to, actually ship it off to production. And so one thing is to definitely try to get involved with each of those facets, and if you have the opportunity to jump from one program to another to expand that environment, that's always a good thing. The other thing is I try to never be full-time on anything. So my whole goal is to never work more than half time on any one project. And luckily, I've got a manager who will support me doing that. And so I've normally got 4 or 5 different things going on and 4 or 5 different programs. Some are Air Force, some are NASA, some are all over the place. But that gives you a lot of breadth very quickly, and it also gives you a lot of different outlets. And on the bad day, all 5 of them are needing you 40 hours a week for the whole week, and your wife hates you. And on the good week, they're all kind of slow-ish, but you never really have that really super low. The other big thing is just take responsibility and take challenges. Obviously take logical risks. If you look at a role and you go, they are screwed, it's never going to work, don't take that role. But if you think you can pull it off and you think it's something that you'd be interested in doing, absolutely, take the opportunity and try.
All right. Does anyone else have anything about making career moves or changes?
I'll make a kind of a comment. Never miss an opportunity to take an interview anywhere. No matter how much you love your job, no matter how happy you are doing what you're doing, never miss that opportunity because you never know what's going to change. I can say that from personal experience. I love my job. I love what I'm doing, and I've turned down interview opportunities at organizations that turned turned out to be relatively important and may have provided a different direction for my career, may have provided new opportunities, bigger opportunities. But I'll never know because I never not even took the chance, because it's an interview. You're not signing your life away. You're just learning a little bit more about another opportunity that may exist, and you never know when that might be important. Either your career changes, your company folds, your program ends, and you get bored and look for something more exciting to do. Even if you don't take the opportunity to take the job from an interview, at least you have had that experience, you've had that opportunity, and that door may be open to you more directly in the future.
Yeah, I would say along those same lines, don't sell yourself short and think, well, I'm never going to get that, so why even waste your time? Because if nothing else, it is a good, and that's the job I have now. When I applied for it and interviewed, my husband, who I love dearly, but said, you're not going to get that. And I said, well, what is the harm? I polished up my resume, I get an interview, which is good practice, always,
Always.
out of it. And, you know, we'll see what becomes of it. So I went for it and got it, to my shock and his.
Well, and that also ties back to the networking conversation, that if you go for an interview or talk to somebody about a job opportunity, it may work out, it may not, but it is part of the relationship building. And to Greg's point, so a key piece of advice, you can never turn down or accept a job offer that you don't have. So everything's hypothetical until you actually have something written in your hand. So I think people, loyalty is very important in our industry and a lot of our companies, but the times are much different to where it used to be that people went to one company and stayed there in the same job their whole time, and that might be Tim. But today people rotate a lot more, and I think there shouldn't be really a fear about that because you never know what'll come up. And the other thing is just to be open to opportunities that you may not have ever expected. For me, I've done some pretty big shifts that also included very big geographic differences. Growing up in Michigan, I moved to Washington, D.C., I moved to Russia, I came back to D.C., I went to Seattle, and now I'm in New Jersey. So, very big things as you're considering opportunities. Sometimes a lifestyle issue comes up, where you're living, how close are you to your family, how far are you from your family. Those can be good or bad at different times of your career, different times of your life. And I remember big shift of going from DC and having this opportunity with Kistler as a startup, with a reusable launch vehicle, privately funded, craziest thing ever. And we were doing work for Kistler at Answer. I did the due diligence on the Russian rocket engines that Kistler wanted to use. And my boss so Kistler asked us to do more systems engineering, and Answer was not, the board said no, because they were taking on too much risk as an entity on a private company to do the systems engineering. So instead, my boss went to be the chief engineer at Kistler, and I kind of joked. I said, oh, well, can I go with you? Totally joking. I'd never even been to Seattle. I didn't know if an RLV would work. And the next thing I know, I have an invitation to come visit when I come work for them. And by the way, my wedding was in 2 months. So I thought, well, I don't know. I thought I was going to settle down. I just got back from living abroad. And so we had a very interesting conversation. And my husband had never lived outside of Maryland or Virginia. So, we're talking about making a pretty big change. And one of the things we discussed on the honeymoon was, should I go for this interview? And it was the same thing. Well, it's just an interview. At least you get to go see what Seattle's like. And when the opportunity came up, I was really nervous about it. I thought, I don't know. I don't know that I want to do this. So he said, if the job was in D.C., would you take it? I said, oh, yeah, hands down. I would just do it. He's like, so what's the big deal? If we don't, we go out there. If we don't like it, we move back. This is why moving companies stay in business. People move around. So I thought, well, yeah, that's a really good perspective. So 2 months minus a day after getting married, I moved to Seattle and did this great move. And my husband did come. He came about 3 months later. And I thought, we'll be here 2 to 3 years. We'll go back to DC. 9 or 10 years later, when Kistler was crumbling, I made the decision to go to Air Launch at the very end. And crazy as it sounds, Air Launch was a Reno, Nevada-based company. And I said, I will join as president, but we are going to be a Washington State company. Shock. We were not going to go back to the East Coast. Building on all those relationships and staying there and taking advantage of that community. And we just did another huge move exactly a year ago, coming back to the East Coast to New Jersey. And I talk about a culture shock in many ways, but mostly because I live on campus with undergrads everywhere, the fraternity house in my backyard. But it was an opportunity that was slightly different, and coming back to some of the technical routes. So you just have to be open to things. You just never know where they're going to take you. And now it's important for us to be closer to our families who are all on the East Coast. So those kind of things come into play as well. So you just never know, being open to those opportunities and take advantage when you can.
So in the current job environment where everyone's concerned about jobs and how it's hard to get a job, especially fresh out of school, what do you all have to say of getting a foot in the door? So let's say you want to be in the aerospace industry, getting a foot in the door versus holding out for that dream job or that position at a certain company that you really want, or a certain position that you really want.
Well, I'll say number one, you're not accepting a job forever.
Yeah. So.
Sometimes there's a very practical thing that you need a job, and it may not be the best one. You're even going to have jobs that you love, and there's going to be days when it's not the best job. So I would take that fear away, and if you have a certain passion and you want to be somewhere else, it might just be a little holding period, and you try to learn as much as you can from it. Take anything possible, and you just never know. Keep in touch with the community that you want to be in, but it's not forever.
Agreed. Well said.
We have a very agreeable panel.
Yeah, that was good.
Does anyone else have any questions about transitions in career, or making moves or changes? We have a quiet audience.
Very quiet.
All right,
There we go.
in the very back.
Is there any caution towards making moves too early?
The question was about making moves too early. Is there
I mean, what you mean after a year, or I wouldn't.
That's your definition. I'm just saying, is there, you're saying move around and making changes. What is, I guess, embedded in that question is what is the optimal time? Is there a time too early? Is there?
Yeah, I don't know that there is an optimal time. I think you'll know it. I do think if you move around a lot, if you take a job, 6 months later you change, you better have a good story to start it, because you're going to start to.
It's all about the story, really.
Yeah.
Right. How you can sell it, because you take a job, only stay there 6 months because it just was not the right fit. But as long as you're prepared to tell the story of why you left so soon to your next prospective employer, or the one after that, then you'll be fine. I think a lot of people kind of get an itch. Well, I shouldn't generalize, but around probably 4-year mark, right out of 4 or 5 years out of school, and they start to think, okay, should I make a move now? I've noticed personally that at that point some people moved location, because a lot of people working for NASA in Houston, the majority I would say are not from Houston, and so at like the 5-year point, a lot of them said, okay, well maybe I want to go back to my family. I don't say that's an optimal time or not an optimal time, but it seems like a common time.
Well, and I think experiences are more important than calendar days too. If you happen to get on a program and that program's wrapping down, if that program's wrapping down after 3 years or a year, leaving where it's a nice conclusion and a chance to close one book and open another one is also a very big key. And one of my mentors, his favorite phrase is, there's no goodbyes in aerospace, because we do kind of end up being circular at some point. And so whatever you do, you can't burn a bridge. So the last thing you want to do is leave a team, in the middle of a really heated activity where they really need your help. And of course there's opportunities that justify it, but at the same time, keep in your back of your head that if I have to face these people in a year or 2 or 10, how are they going to remember me?
Yeah, and that's really important even if you're in a bad situation, because sometimes things can get very emotional in maybe a situation that's really stressful, or you hate your boss, or you're not being treated how you thought you should be treated. And those are hard things to handle, because the tendency may be to want to run away from something, or just say, well, I don't care, I'm going to quit. I agree with everything. There's no right or wrong time, and you kind of know that. I completely agree that you need to prepare things. I was ready to be president of Air Launch for 6 months. I had the job offer. It was all done. Everything was ready. But I waited 6 months because it was very important to end Kistler at that time in the company. And maybe a good measure is that there's 2 ways of making a change. You're either running away from something, or you're running to something. And it's usually better to run to something. because you know you're doing it for the right reasons and for the right opportunities. When you run away from something, and there may be times when that's a legitimate thing, usually the one you go to next is probably not going to last, almost like the rebound relationship, where you had to get out of it and do something new, but it's probably not going to last. So that can be a good measure, test when you're considering an opportunity of why is this interesting to you and what's the right context for it.
One more quick piece. One of my friends, his motto is, I want to make it where I can leave in a day if I need to. And so he focuses on like having where he mentors somebody where it's his own succession plan. And so he knows if he has to leave, it's not only, okay, I'm sorry I have to leave, I have this great opportunity. It's here's who you should go to, who I've trained or who I've already worked with, and they know the background, they know what's going on. And so he kind of has built in his own succession plan out of the whole thing of knowing not wanting to burn a bridge, but also not wanting to turn down an opportunity. So you have to definitely think about everything you do on if you were going to do, how you go forward. There's one more question back there.
Yep.
I don't know if you've had this experience, but if you've gone from being more of an analyst, data-related job to a managerial job and come back,
So, go ahead.
and how is that transition and return back to either, from either finding a job in that manner or in managing that transition back from the managerial realm to an analyst realm?
The question was, has anyone gone from an analyst sort of number cruncher position to a managerial position and then gone back to an analyst type position, and how was the transition? To summarize, does that summarize it? Okay.
No, I haven't.
Well, it's not perfect, but I'm sort of doing that now in a way that after running a company, doing major development, going into an academic and research environment, for me it's been very interesting to be in a research environment in a university, which is very different than how industry does business. At Stevens, I'm in the Systems Engineering School of Systems and Enterprises, which is a graduate school, but it's very it's technical, but it's also big picture. But it's interesting to go kind of back into something that incorporates a lot more technical things. Very enlightening, I think, having the experiences, no matter what you do, what kind of transition, technical to managerial or vice versa. A lot of what I do right now is focusing on technical leaders who are progressing in their career to be a chief engineer or a chief technical officer or a head of corporate engineering. You can't go to school for that. There's no such thing as the school of how to be a chief engineer. So what I found in this transition is actually bringing those technical and business and managerial experiences into that context is kind of interesting and very fun.
And I guess I'll add, I feel like in this industry, and maybe it's like this in all industries, sometimes the people who are really good at the analyst positions are the ones who get moved up into the managerial positions even when it's not what they like, or maybe not where their skills lie. And I guess this is not speaking from experience, but going back to what Sarah said of you have to do what you love. And I guess if you're in that position, even if it's a higher position or better paid or more prestige or whatever, if you're not enjoying it, I would say that would seem like a natural time to maybe transition back to a more analyst type position. It's sort of what I've heard from other people.
Yeah, I hope that companies do reward people who stay on technical tracks. NASA struggles with this, and people complain that they don't give the government service level promotions to the technical tracks, and so then the people who are really technically good are forced to take a management position to get a promotion. They are hopefully getting better at it, and I don't know how it is across the rest of the industry, but that is a problem, because if you are really good technically and really like it technically, you should be rewarded for staying technical. My personal opinion.
Well, and some companies do have technical tracks to run in parallel, maybe be a tech fellow most senior technical people in the company. A lot of organizations do that, and actually the technical leadership program I just mentioned is designed exactly to fill that kind of gap, to where if you look at enterprise decision making, you want technical people to have a role at the table, to be able to bring some of the perspectives technically, but usually then the technical people don't know how to talk to the business people, and the business people don't know how to talk to the technical people, and if you're a technical person who became a business person, you may have forgotten how to be a technical person. So creating a balance and allowing the technical side to understand the business, but still be technical is something that a lot of organizations feel is very important right now, and there's even Department of Defense research that's being funded on workforce development, looking at all these skills throughout the life cycle of a career.
I think there's another question back there. Yep.
So say hypothetically go through my career, same job, and then generally am I, really lucky, or am I, two ways, am I selling myself short? Am I less worthy because I'm not, senior or
So the question was, if hypothetically you go through your entire career in the same company or doing something similar the whole time, does that mean you're incredibly lucky, or does that mean you were complacent and missed out on opportunities? Is that... Ed?
If you're happy, at the end of the day, I'd say that's all that matters.
I agree with that. And then also I think it's how you do it too. I mean, if you stick your head in their sand and don't pay attention to what's going on and don't, but that's one thing. It's another if you're very well connected, you know what's going on all over the place, you know what the other industries are doing, you know what the options are, but at the same time you're happy where you are, that's fine.
And remember my advice about being an expert where there is none. And if you are that expert and you are there and that is what you do and that is what you love, do it.
Yeah.
So in that case, you'd be lucky.
Yeah.
And one thing I've learned in my very few years of experience is you can always tell when you're lying to yourself. I mean, it's very hard to lie to yourself. And if you start noticing other people talking about their moves and you feel this little twinge of jealousy or, man, I wonder if would I be happier somewhere else, then maybe it's time to start at least looking and thinking of other options.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other questions? Trevor, did you have a comment earlier?
Debbie pretty much covered it. I came from Honeywell Technology Services, and one of the big problems, and this has been recognized for years, is when you get a technical person, and often this is someone with a PhD, and you try, and the only way for advancement is through management. So you get a really talented technical person and force them, or they feel forced to go into management, and it's not a good fit, and this is the case where it's good for them to go back. But good companies like Honeywell, I think a lot of them are doing, are recognizing that, so they do have a management track, and they do have a technical track, and the positions and salaries are commensurate with each other. So if you really enjoy the technical thing, the company sees you as a valuable resource as a manager, and they keep you in the technical area. And actually NASA, back in the Apollo program, noticed that they were getting PhDs into management positions that weren't a good fit. So they actually started up a new program called the Master of Engineering and Doctor of Engineering. And actually I got a Doctor of Engineering through this program. And what it was is it's a mixture of technical and management. So they were trying to bring out advanced degrees that also had project management training. And I've noticed that there are about half a dozen universities that were selected to implement this particular program, and I have students do a bunch of them. So this is recognized as a problem now, I think, pretty much industry-wide, and if not, then, and you really enjoy the technical thing, then you might want to consider changing to a different company.
Okay, thank you for those thoughts. I guess if there are no immediate questions, I have another one. Does anyone have a question right now? Okay, so this morning in the plenary, Roger Crone was talking about the disparity between the ages in our industry and how 25% of the workforce in the aerospace industry are 35 or younger, and 75% is over that. So how do we tackle the challenge of knowledge transfer and making sure that as young professionals we're bringing new ideas, but we're also listening to the lessons learned from the more experienced people?
Ask for war stories. I mean, ask for broken hardware, ask what they've done, ask when the good old days used to be, and you get, at least with my company, you get some of those old guys talking and you're going, it's 7 o'clock, guys, I gotta go home. And then it's part of that mentoring thing too. Also, for whatever reason, a bunch of the really interesting guys walk at lunch, and so go walk with them. And I mean, they'll just like walk around the campus or something, but the stories you will hear are way better than any report you'll ever read. And then also, if you do have to go read a report at some point, see if the person's still alive and call them.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I hope that people are in companies and are doing succession planning, and I hope that it's not seen as a threat to the person that's being planned underneath. That, I think, is a little bit of a problem in some cases where people, if they say, hey, this person is going to be your apprentice, or, train them, they say, that kind of loses my job security. And I hope that's not the case, because that's really the only way you can do it, or not the only way, but the best way to do it is have people who are shadowing, learning the ropes from the folks that are reaching the retirement age. And probably have multiple people, because the risk of the person you just trained up leaving is a real risk.
Yeah, I think mentoring is very important in this role, and learning on the job and alongside people who had the previous experiences, and mixing teams together to where you have a combination of people with more experience and people who have less experience in that area. And by the way, that's not necessarily an age thing, because you might move into a new job where you might be older than somebody, but you're the new person in that particular area. At Kistler, we were very much set up, the whole company, as a mentoring opportunity, because we had very senior people. The CEO was head of the Apollo program, and is in his mid-90s right now. And they had all retired, and this was job number 12, because they were so excited to do something different that they were willing to give back, and paired with younger engineers who were all the systems leads. And it was a fantastic mentoring opportunity, because it was a mix in the team, not just the same old people who did it, but a little bit of a mix. And coming to Greg's point earlier about storytelling is actually a very effective way of knowledge transfer, and it's been used for billions of years of how do you transfer, maybe not billions, but transferring knowledge through pictures, or through graphics, or writing, or verbal storytelling, which sometimes changes. The telephone story changes a little bit when you start telling it and telling it and telling it. But one effective way to do that in organizations is to put a little structure to that. So have a lunch and learn event, invite some of the more senior people to a lunch event, video them, put it on YouTube, put it in the company if somebody couldn't make it, and ask questions, do little mini interviews, oral interviews where you say, what was it like back then? And it could even be a little talk show format or something that's fun, so it's a mix of storytelling and knowledge transfer at the same time.
I'd just like to mention that NASA has an oral history program going on where they interview all the Apollo engineers, not just the astronauts, but the engineers and that, and they're recording this library to try and capture the knowledge. And it's done orally, so it can be done fairly quickly with without a lot of effort on the part of the person being interviewed. But those histories are available
if you couldn't hear what he said NASA has an oral history program where they're recording the stories orally of the people who ran the Apollo programs and the early programs to make sure that those get documented, and encourages other organizations to do similar things. So those are available. Anything by NASA should be widely available to the public. That would be interesting to listen to.
One really good model is TED. Did anybody listen to TED videos? So, they're roughly in 18-minute chunks, which is about the attention span of what people are willing to listen to. We're even using a lot of this in universities and academia, because lecturing that takes an hour, nobody listens to that. So if you did interviews with people in your organization, you wanted to capture it, and you think about that, if you keep it to 18 minutes or so, that maybe somebody would actually listen to it. If it's 3 hours, it maybe you wouldn't get all the way through, but ask a very pointed question of a specific experience, or to relate something, and share that can be posted for anybody to listen to and learn from.
This is on our hour-and-a-half panel. Hopefully everyone's still
I was just thinking that.
But it's little pieces, so.
Each segment is only 8
That's right, that's right.
So are there any other questions? Go ahead.
It seems like everybody has some sort of story for their first couple of years on the job. Sometimes it's a horror story, like they didn't do anything for the first 6 months. Sometimes it's the complete opposite. It's great. But there always seems to be some sort of lesson learned from what the beginning of their career was that they tend to tell people. Do you guys have a single or a couple of lessons learned that you could describe for the beginning of each of your careers?
The question was if each of them could describe a single or a few lessons learned from the very early stages of the careers, because everyone has a story of something in the first few years. And I'll extend that to sort of, learning from mistakes too is a good part that people often overlook and try to forget their mistakes. But so we'll just go down the line this time and start with Sarah.
Let's see. The first thing that comes to mind for me, actually, sort of tangentially related to what I did directly for day-to-day work. So I hired into mission control or mission ops directorate at NASA. And so what I found when I first started working is I went from being in college and being like really super busy and running all sorts of things, like being president of the local AIAA student chapter and president of the SGT, the Aerospace Honor Society chapter, to like showing up at work and being at the bottom of the pool and working, long hours or standard hours, but then having kind of a void left from where I had all that previous responsibility and leadership experience. So I looked for a way to fulfill that. And a lot of people, they'll go do sports or do church things or volunteer with Girl Scouts. And I think all those things are fabulous, and I did some of those. But I was really looking for something technical and something that could offer leadership development. And so I actually ended up getting involved after, it's about 2 years out, with the local AIAA section, because I realized that was leadership development. If I took an officer position in the local section, I am now all of a sudden leading a group of colleagues and peers of all age ranges, young people, older folks. It's networking, but it's also leadership development. And I, moved through the ranks in the local section as kind of leadership development that I was not getting from my job at the first couple of years. And it's actually, I've sold it that way. I've used it to my advantage, and people do recognize that as relevant leadership development.
I would say probably one of the lessons I learned in my first couple of years, similar to Sarah, I worked in mission operations. I worked for a contractor, United Space Alliance, and my job was to develop the ascent trajectory for the space shuttle. So what we would do is we would run computer simulation code that somebody wrote 15, 20 years ago, push a button, and you get some numbers that come out, and then you look at those numbers and you compare them to the numbers that they've got from that same program over the last 20 years, and you make sure they're within a tolerance of 5%, give or take. And that was on purpose, by the way. I was not a fan of the monotony in the day-to-day processes. So one of the things that I really tried to do was be proactive about, hey, we can improve this process and we can save all of us time and energy if we make these kind of tweaks to the software, if we do such and so, if we make these process improvements. And the resounding result to that recommendation, or those continuing recommendations, were, that's how we've always done it, that's how we'll always do it, and I don't want to lose my job by writing myself out of a job. For many reasons, certainly not just that, but many other reasons, the United Space Alliance is struggling at the moment. And as an operations company, their overhead is exceptionally high, especially compared to other organizations, that other launch companies that are out there. And I think to some extent that old school mentality that came from the Apollo era and transitioned into the shuttle era will hopefully not continue to transition down the line. But I guess the lesson learned for me was that it was a growth opportunity where I realized that I wasn't in the right place for me, that it was an uphill battle. And I'm all about having a fight and pushing and fighting my way through the brush, but at the end of the day, it was trying to fight my way up a cliff is a little difficult. And I recognized that personally my perspective and my experience and my desires were completely tangential to the direction that organization was going. So my learning experience was you can't always win all the fights, but you look for the fights you can win and you jump into those.
Both of those are really good, and were kind of my two first ideas, so we'll go to number 3. Number 3, if you've got a skill, like if you're really good at public speaking, or you're really good at putting PowerPoints together, or you're really good at doing reports, volunteer to do those for the committees you're on. I happen to be very good at public speaking, or at least that's what I'm told, and so I always volunteered to do it. And a lot of the people I worked with didn't want to do it. So you were seen as kind of a team player because you were picking up the thing that they didn't really want to deal with. And then second, it gives you a 100% free license to ask dumb questions and all questions, because you've got to be the one who's got to pull all this information together, whether it's writing the report or putting the presentation together or giving the briefing. And so it gives you unlimited access to all the people on a team where you can go bug them and try to figure out where things came from, how they worked, why they're working. And so it's a very good way in your first year or two to get a lot of exposure, both A, you're a team player and putting things together and you're in front of everybody, and then also B, exposure to what all these different people do that are on a team and where you kind of want to go.
I'm so glad I'm last because it gave me time to try to remember what those first few years were like. So one idea that came to mind as Tim was talking is when I was very early on at Answer, a trip came up to Huntsville, and they said, "Oh, great! Send the intern or something, because who wanted to go to Huntsville in July or August?" And sorry, Sandy, who's over there from Huntsville. And it was just very funny. I thought, well, what's wrong with going to Huntsville? NASA's there. I'm so excited. And it was an opportunity that, little did I know, I went as the youngest person there on a really cool project. And it was clear that they needed some help, so I could volunteer. I could take notes. I could be the rapporteur, help pull together, right on the board when we had our white sheets to write on, and it was an opportunity to get known, to contribute something, and just take advantage. That literally was a silly thing to say, oh, you can take this trip, you can start traveling now, because the other person didn't want to travel, and I was able to take advantage of that opportunity. Similarly to what Sarah said, I was really active in college in a lot of leadership roles, all the same ones she was in, and president of Society of Women Engineers, and looking for that activity in professional societies. Absolutely, it's a great professional development opportunity, because sometimes in organizations it takes time for you to have those leadership opportunities, and takes you may not have them inside of your company. And I was fortunate enough to, first of all, I was passionate about doing things like that, and I had leadership who recognized that as well and facilitated my getting involved early. And that was great personal growth and a way to satisfy things that made me happy, and stay active in organizations like AIAA throughout the years. Becomes kind of your own alumni group throughout your career. So some of those things you do very early on, or pick the passions that you really like, pick up the slack, pick up the opportunities where there needs a volunteer, be the volunteer, and give it a try, because you will learn, and you also will meet other people and learn from them.
Small world. That's funny.
Are there any other
There it
Never.
is.
any other questions? They got loud all of a sudden. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it's a
Okay,
sign.
we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to let each panelist kind of leave us with their parting shot, and then there will be more time for questions at the end, and they're willing to stick around for a few extra minutes if anyone wants to come up and ask them questions. Can you all still hear?
Is there any way to kill that air conditioner if anybody works for
All
the
right,
conference center?
we'll talk a little louder.
Yeah.
So I just want each panelist to leave us with one piece of advice that you want everyone here to take away with them today, and try to keep it concise so it's easy to remember.
Start down there.
All right, we'll start with Deborah
Okay.
this time.
My number one piece of advice is to. Oh,
Hey,
thank
There we
you.
go.
Thank you.
Well done,
Oh, very good.
Chris.
My number one piece of advice is to pass it on. So I gave you one homework to look up the mentoring. So your second homework is, as you go to an event tonight, start the practice of passing on what you learned. So in this session today, you heard from all of us, you learned something hopefully, and pass that advice on to somebody else, somebody you're mentoring, one of your colleagues, maybe you're at the reception or at the bar or whatever, and share something that you learned. It's going to be good practice for the networking, good practice for mentoring, and also remembering and learning something from today and holding that longer. I always tell anybody that I mentor that they must pass it on, that it's not a secret or a privilege of what you learn, but it's more your responsibility to share that information and create the collaboration. So pass it on.
Mine, I think, is, make your own luck and own your own career. I mean, it's easy when you hear these certain panels, you're like, oh, they just got lucky, or oh, it just happened that they happen to have the right mentor that yanked them up the chain, or at the end of the day, you have to put yourself in the right situation. So whether that's building your own network or building your own mentor group, but you have to take ownership for it, and don't for a second think even of your mentors are going to have your best interest in mind. And so you've got to remember it's your life, and you're the one who's got to drive yourself forward, and you've got to always keep that in the back of your head in anything you do, and don't just leave it to chance, and don't just leave it to somebody else to take care of you, because odds are it's not going to happen.
I guess my parting comments will be always, always, always focus on actively building your professional network. Similar to what Tim was saying, you're in control of your own destiny, so you need to go out and you need to build that network, because it might help you find a job, it might help you get a collaborative project with another organization, it might help you realize that there is greener grass out there, and it's not just always greener on the other side of the fence. But always take advantage of building your professional network. And if you don't consider yourself strong in that area, if you don't feel that you're confident enough to go up and talk to someone, there are 5 people up here behind this table that you can quite freely come up and say, hey, my name is whatever, and here's what I do. And that can start a conversation. And I think each and every one of us would be excited to be able to talk to each and every one of you and to help us build our professional networks while simultaneously helping you guys build yours.
Tim stole mine. Let's see. I think I've said most of it. I'll just reiterate to do what you're passionate about, not what you think is going to, get you the most prestige or the most money, or you're going to live in the coolest location necessarily, although that's nice. Just do what you're passionate about, and if you find that you're not passionate about something, change, move, do something different. Don't be afraid to take a lateral move, or don't always compare yourself and say, well, everyone else I graduated with is ahead of me, or, seemingly. Seemingly is the part. Yeah, they probably are not as happy if they're not following their passions. So, much love.
All right, thank you for those comments. And I'll just remind everyone there are a lot of topics that they have spoken to me about, such as living abroad and how to network when you're not comfortable, when you're more of an introvert and things like that. So if there's a specific topic we didn't cover today, just come up and talk to me afterwards, and I can kind of point you to which one would be good to talk to. It's probably all of them, but I can give you one to start with.
Right. Grad school. We didn't.
We didn't even touch on going to grad school and the value of master's degrees and multiple master's degrees and PhDs and things like that. So if there's anything you want to hear more about, just come talk to me or any of us afterwards. I'm also very curious to know what everyone thought about this panel and the YP programming in general, because this is a learning process and we're trying to continually improve it within AIAA in general, particularly at this conference, but across the board nationally and locally. So if you have any feedback on that, again, talk to any one of us or Chris Horton, who's been running around helping organize things. So we'd really appreciate any feedback you have. Yes?
Is it okay if I just give a couple words?
Sure. Do you want to speak into it? Okay.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Trevor Sorensen, originally from Australia, which is why we think I'm talking about. But I'm the director of the Space and Missiles Group of AIAA, which consists of the 13 technical committees in the space and missiles area. This is our technical conference for the Space and Missiles Group. And I wanted to announce a new initiative of SMG, as we call it, that's starting this week, and it's called the SMG Associate Members Initiative. And we recognize that the young people, the young professionals, is a precious resource to the industry, to AIAA, and we want to try and improve the relationship and also the participation and attract young people into the organization. And as mentioned earlier, networking is extremely important, and one of the best ways you can network, and with very high people too, and very good engineers and innovators in the industry, is to participate in AIAA in the section, but also become a member of a technical committee. And technical committees are not just older senior people. Do not be afraid of them. As a matter of fact, part of this initiative is that I'm asking all the technical committees, a technical committee normally has 35 members, and they usually have 1 or 2 associate members, which are members under 35 years of age. And I'm going to be rewarding technical committees that have at least 6 associate members. We have a best PC competition each year. They get extra points if they have associate members, which are young professionals that come in. I'm going to have an associate member raised up to a deputy director level. I have 4 deputy directors. I'm going to get a 5th one who's going to be an associate member. We're going to have a best associate member of the year competition that gets a nice award. They will be the coordinator of associate member activities within SMG and all the TCs. They'll be the liaison to the Young Professional Society, and they will be the associate editor of the SMG newsletter. So we really think that this is important to get young professionals in, so that we have a wide diversity of topics, interests in the technical committees. So please get on the AIAA website or talk to any of the AIAA members. Find a technical committee, whether it's space systems, launch systems, operations, tenders, whatever it is. Find one that you're interested in and put your application in to join it. And it's great networking. You'll be involved. You'll become a session chair at these conferences. We'll use associate members for that. So I really encourage you to get involved with the technical committee.
And Trevor, actually, for those of you in the audience, page 25 of your program actually lists a lot of these activities and technical activity committees that are related to AIAA. So it kind of gives you a bit of a breakdown of what does exist out there. And there's a lot of opportunities.
You mentioned that you just became chair of one of these.
Yeah, I got to share that earlier.
So thank you, Trevor. So it's 6 o'clock, which is the official end time of this panel. The welcome reception starts in about 30 minutes. So if you want to sneak off to one more presentation, you can. Otherwise, I think we still have this room available to just mingle, and you can talk to the other young professionals here, come ask the panel questions, and then we'll go enjoy the welcome reception. So thank you for attending.
Thanks.
Yeah.